People who waited until marriage to have sex but later divorced. How did you view sex afterwards? Wow, in retrospect, sexual compatibility is incredibly important. I was deeply into purity culture when I married my now ex-husband, at age 23, and naively believed that having sex for the first time upon marriage would flip a switch and cause me be attracted to him and be able to orgasm. I married a man I wasn't attracted to due to family, church pressure, and because I didn't believe, back then, that physical attraction was very important. It felt shallow and worldly. I was so discouraged during our honeymoon, because sex hurt way more than I expected it would, and it wasn't remotely pleasurable for me. That pretty much continued throughout our 5-year marriage. He was intensely selfish in bed, and refused to do things like go down on me. He told me he hated the smell so much. Once I tried to mix things up by bringing home some edible body gel. His response was to get angry at me. It's so gross to mix food and sex. You should know that. Eventually, sex became a chore. I did my best to be a good wife in that arena and fulfill my duty to him, but I was always relieved when it was over, knowing that he'd be good for the next couple nights. After my divorce, I remained celibate for 8 years until I met my ex of last year. In that time, I was convinced that maybe I had what the Bible calls the gift of celibacy, since I wasn't remotely interested in sex for the most part. When I met my ex of last year, though, I was starting to loosen up on my purity stance. I finally decided to try premarital sex for the first time ever. I was incredibly guilty afterwards, but I also began to feel desirable, which is something I haven't felt in years. Though the rest of our relationship was unhealthy, I do credit my ex for my sexual reawakening. After my ex and I split, I got together with my current BF. With him, sex is amazing. He's extremely attentive in bed, and goes down on me several times a week. With him, I screamed during orgasm for the first time in my life. It felt so beautiful and healing, I actually cried afterwards. Now, the religious guilt is mostly gone, though it'll still pop up every now and then. I still believe in a God, higher power of some sort, but I've mostly shaken off the strict fundamentalism of my youth. I read the Bible, don't remember anything about gifts of celibacy. Someone made that shit up. Not divorced, because I do love him and the life we have together, but we did open our relationship because I turned out to be very, very gay. I know someone in that situation. They finally divorced after 14 years because both wanted to move on. So they got neighboring flats and are still best friends. I'm going to cry while writing this. A man, 21. My parents wanted me to marry, raped me, 18, and used pictures to speed up the engagement to marriage. Every experience with him was rape, and he once, 5 or 6 years into the abusive marriage, asked me why I wasn't having a good time. So I told him I never wanted any of this. He forced me every time and I couldn't say no because he hung the pictures over my head and said he'd release them to family and paint me as a whore. He also took more pictures and videos after hurting me and assaulting me without consent. My mom said she'd rather I died than divorce, so yay religion. He tried going down and told me he found me too disgusting. That hurt more than being raped, honestly. When I was planning on running away and he could tell I had distanced myself from him, I woke up in the middle of the night to him performing extremely rough oral that had me crying in pain. He said he was just trying to fix the marriage. Long story short, I ran away with the kids I didn't consent to having and am on my own. Haven't experienced consent or even a first kiss yet. I'm going to be celibate so I can feel safe, but one day, I might try something. I wish I wasn't so afraid of God or being called a whore. I would have reported him and shrugged off revenge porn with or without my family's support. If I ever marry again, probably unlikely. Sexual compatibility and respect are extremely important to know about beforehand. Your situation in some ways is like mine. I found counseling to be incredibly helpful. I haven't married again, but there is such peace in healing, and I hope you are able to find that peace. Give yourself whatever time or space you need, but don't be afraid to reach out for help along the way. You're worth it. Through a window. Ha ha ha. Sex. I sure do love having sex, am I right, fellow Redditors who also totally definitely have sex? I do the sex a lot too. It's just sex. I very much enjoy it and enjoy experiencing it with different people. Some people are really good at it, some are really bad. I regret waiting until marriage, definitely missed out on a lot of life because of that. Now I'm approaching my late 30s trying to make up for lost time. Sex is awesome and I deprived myself of it for way too long. In 4K. Source of income. I think you found your profession. I actually had a convo about this with a coworker of mine the other day, and by the other day I mean like a year and a half ago. She grew up in a very religious and conservative household in rural Michigan, like wasn't even allowed to wear makeup of any sort until she was 18, also wasn't allowed to date until she graduated high school. So she started dating a guy in her church as soon as it was acceptable and he kept wanting to do the dirty deed but she wouldn't until they were married. So he proposed and they got married way too quick. She started college but had to drop out when she got pregnant shortly after. They had 2 kids together by the time they were 20 and realized that they were not compatible at all. He became a real boss and she had to do the single mother thing while also providing for her kids. She's a great mother but she definitely regrets rushing into marriage and parenthood just because that was the socio-cultural norm she was raised in. He was also abusive and she was basically disowned by her family when she made the decision to file for divorce. She moved out of state and has gone through some tough times but always provided for her kids. By the time I met her she had already worked her way up into a decent career. She recently took night courses to complete her bachelor's degree and now has a great job with a client we work with. I think I rambled there and it's not really my story to tell but I hope this helps. She regrets getting a late start but she's worked her ass off and is doing well now. I've definitely sowed my wild oats since my divorce. I look to please my partner more as I've educated myself. I'm not afraid to try new positions and role play. And this is mostly thanks to our sex over 30. Yeah, I role play as a paladin. Why does everyone make jokes about Reddit users not having sex? I mean, come on guys, this isn't Parler. Well, I think Parler users are probably having sex. It's just that the other person probably doesn't want to. Late 90s, early aughts purity culture set a weird unachievable standard for a lot of us. Sexual compatibility is important, but understanding your own views on sexuality is even more important than that. You've gotta figure out how. There's more to it than insertion and insemination. I know, objectively, a lot of people get that. I get how a plane works, but I'm not going to fly a Cessna without lessons. Everyone's different, and understanding your wants beyond a biological imperative you've done nothing with is kinda key to making a relationship with a sexual component work. Not divorced, but card-carrying lifetime member of our widowers for the past 6 years now. Why did I decide to wait? Dunno. It wasn't peer pressure. It wasn't religious pressure. At least, if it was very subtle. I always felt like, this should be special, meaningful, done with someone I'm going to be spending the rest of my life with. I also always felt like, this, marriage, is only going to be a one-time thing for me. Turns out I was right. Just in the most ed up way possible, FML. So my view towards sex now? I'm glad I waited, but this appendage between my legs is useless to me now, _. Well thanks for sharing man. Real sorry to hear though. Know that you got a random internet stranger praying for ya. See, we did the opposite. Had lots of sex until we got married and then stopped. We did one better. We waited until marriage, then had almost no sex after. It was meh. I don't know whether it was me or him. But I certainly do not feel pleasure from penetration. So I never miss sex so far. Haven't tried it with other men though. I have a friend who never enjoyed sex with guys. I distinctly remember her asking, is it meant to be this shit? She came out a few years later and has never been happier. I was incredibly disappointed during my marriage. I wish I'd just had sex earlier and enjoyed it with various trusted partners. But now I'm in a sexually compatible, happy, healthy relationship and I'm grateful for my perspective, just a little disillusioned with Christianity. From a computer monitor with a windshield wiper? I'm not divorced, but I've thought about what would happen if my husband died before me. I'd be much more casual about sex if I started dating again. Especially since we left our religion after we'd gotten married, so my whole attitude about sex changed. Interesting. This is what all the fuss is about? Was not impressed. My story echoes so many others out here. Married young, religious, he was controlling and abusive, really bad at sex, and worse at love. I was nearly 40 when we divorced, and ended up getting together with a coworker who was 14 years younger than me, and treated me like a goddess. It was my first experience with great sex, mutual attraction and mutual respect, and I pretty much cried with grief over the years I'd lost to Christian bullshit and abuse. Coworker and I parted ways amicably when he moved for a different job, still friends now, 15 years later, and my relationships since have been wonderful, but I developed much higher standards, of course. It convinced me that if there is a God, he is cruel and heartless. I want nothing to do with the church or that God anymore. Love seeing a question where about 6 people fit the criteria and 277 comments. I'll see how it goes in a few weeks. Probably not gonna divorce though. We both waited until marriage. She had me convinced that she would enjoy sex and be totally into it. Boy, was I ever wrong. Rarely did she ever want sex. She didn't even want me to focus on her having an orgasm. I am torn because the Bible clearly says it is wrong to have sex before marriage, but it also says it doesn't want us to live in shame. Outside of having kids with her, I would not have married her had I known what I was getting into.
Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.